What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, December 26, 2018. Happy Boxing Day. Happy Kwanzaa. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations. And big news right now. First of all, the Dow is having a heck of a day. It's up over 1,000. And I don't know what's there to explain it, plunge protection team, or everybody just decided it was a buy opportunity, but it's up over 1,000. So the money junkies are happy today here. Donald Trump made an unannounced visit to the soldiers in Iraq. He took First Lady Melania with him. They're over there right now. And Trump is tweeting out videos of him with all of our soldiers, and I think that was a very nice thing for him to do. Over the weekend, in fact, on Christmas Day, Israel attacked Damascus, and the Syrian air defenses intercepted hostile targets over the capital. Now, supposedly, all but 2 of the Israeli missiles were shot down. And apparently, Israel was able to get into position because they hid behind passenger airlines. They used them as cover, and they were basically, there were 6 Israeli F-16 fighters. They violated Lebanese airspace, and while passing over Sidon, fired 16 laser-guided GBU-39 bombs towards targets in and around the capital of Damascus, 14 of which were intercepted by the Syrian air defense systems. Now, the Russian Ministry of Defense has confirmed the IDF jets flew into firing position just as 2 civilian passenger airliners were in the air preparing for their landings in both Beirut and Damascus airport. And as a result, Syrian military defense units did not deploy its surface-to-air missiles and electronic jamming against the F-16s. They just sat there swatting the Israeli missiles out of the air, and apparently were quite successful at it. Now, the Russian Ministry of Defense is saying that by doing this, the IDF created a direct threat to these 2 passenger planes. And I imagine these airlines are probably going to have some complaints. I understand that both Syria and Lebanon are already filing formal complaints with the UN Security Council over Israel's violation of their territory, and basically saying this was a provocation on the part of Israel. Now, Israel is saying the target of the raids were Iranian weapons depot near Damascus. Of course, that's what they always say. And Lebanese state-run national news said the Israeli warplanes performed mock raids above southern Lebanon, just rattling the windows here. Now, it's interesting to note that the S-300 missile system is not yet in active service. Apparently, the Syrians are having a little trouble training on up. They're expected to go online the middle of next month or possibly February, which means if Israel's going to do something dramatic, they have to do it within the next 4 to 6 weeks. Meanwhile, story that we're seeing coming on out from Russia's Novossiysk Gazette said that Israel is preparing for a comprehensive war on Syria following the U.S. withdrawal from the country. And the newspaper said that Trump's decision to withdraw American troops from Syria has left Israel forced to face the Iranian presence in Syria with its troops alone. So, Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman is out there saying that the American departure is raising the morale of President Bashar al-Assad and his allies Iran and Lebanese Hezbollah. So it's getting very, very tense over there. Meanwhile, Israel, which loves to build walls, they were building a cement border wall opposite the southern Lebanese village of Kar Kila. And apparently they were forced to halt construction when the Lebanese army pointed out that they were not actually building the wall on the border, but in fact were building it quite a distance into Lebanese territory, which Israel has done in the past. They certainly did it with their security wall, where they sent it deep into Palestinian territory and just locked it on up here. But apparently a team from the Lebanese Army's Geographic Affairs Unit was seen standing behind the border fence and marking disputed areas just beyond it. The Army then informed UNIFIL personnel on the ground, who in turn ordered the Israeli soldiers to move back 7 meters behind the planned course of the cement wall that Israel wanted. So, all right, as you know, Mattis is out, and the concern is Blackwater may be back. And apparently, they're already running an ad in the gun and hunting magazine Recoil, recruiting people. And the banner headline on the ad is, "We are coming." So we know that Trump is pulling all of the U.S. forces out of Syria. He's pulling about half the forces out of Afghanistan. Are we really ending the wars in those countries, or are they about to become privatized and hence a lot more expensive here? All righty. Now, a lot of people are still responding to Trump's decision to pull out of Syria. And apparently, ex-Republican Senator Rick Santorum basically slammed Donald Trump in an interview on CNN, arguing the United States was abandoning its allies. Now, Santorum previously represented Pennsylvania, said he's a very strong supporter of the president, but that the move is not a good idea, arguing that it will embolden Iran and allow Turkey to target the Kurds. And that last one definitely looks like it's about to happen here. So Santorum said, "I'm very disappointed in the president that he would do this in this fashion." So where are those troops going? Are they really coming home, or are they being redeployed for some other adventure? That's what we don't know yet. What we do know is that Republicans and undemocratic Democrats are in lockstep over Washington's aim to rule the world militarily, wanting all nations co-opted as vassal states, the American empire. And it's probably the only thing that we have a unanimity of opinion on. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. Senator Pat Toomey, who's the current senator from Pennsylvania, and he's a very influential voice in the Senate Republican Conference, says he and his GOP colleagues need to step up to balance President Trump's foreign policy decisions. So this is another voice saying, bad idea to pull out of Syria. And Toomey said on Sunday, the vast majority of Republicans disagree with Trump's sudden and unexpected announcement that he would withdraw 2,000 U.S. troops from Syria because he believes the terrorist threat posed by ISIS in the region has been defeated. And I imagine the timer is now running on a false flag to remind us that ISIS is still out there here. Ron Paul, of course, disagrees. He thinks pulling the troops out of Syria and Afghanistan is a good start. And, you know, it's kind of amazing because all of a sudden, the never-Trumpers, who for the last 2 years have been telling us the president was dangerous because he could get us into a war, now they're angry because he's trying to end 2 wars. They're angry because he's trying to make peace with North Korea. No making those people happy. General Wesley Clark, the former commando of NATO's forces, questioned whether Turkish President Recep Erdogan actually blackmailed President Trump into his decision to remove U.S. troops from Syria. And Wesley Clark went on to say there doesn't seem to be any strategic rationale for the decision. And if there's no strategic rationale for the decision, then you have to ask, why was the decision made? So people around the world are asking this, and some of our friends and allies in the Middle East are asking, did Erdogan blackmail the president? Was there a payoff or something? Why would a guy make a decision like this because all the recommendations were against him? Well, he is the president, and he does get to make those decisions. And it's no secret he wanted to get out of Syria. He was talking about it last March. And I think it's coming on down to, who's running the show here? And Donald Trump is the president, and policy is his, his playground, if you will. He is the commander-in-chief. Now, as the Syrian militants skedaddle, they have left many weapons caches behind. And when they were retreating from the Syrian army, they're discovering all these underground militants caches close to the border with the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. And apparently inside it were weapons from the U.S. and from Israel. There were anti-tank missiles, mortars, rifles, and machine guns. These were produced in the U.S., Israel, and Jordan, as well as huge amounts of ammunition. And apart from the weaponry, the Syrian army found protective gear, satellite communication devices, and medical equipment also made in the U.S. and Israel. So we know who was really backing these so-called militants here. Now, not all the U.S. troops are on their way to the border just yet. Apparently, eyewitnesses are saying that U.S. troops are still on patrol in the Syrian city of Manbij. And they're still patrolling the streets. And, of course, the further away from the coast you are, the longer it's going to take to get on out of there. So they're probably just, guarding the rear of the departing forces here. Apparently, U.S. airstrikes are also continuing inside Syria, despite the withdrawal announcement. Now, Trump said the air campaign would continue until all of the U.S. soldiers were out. But this article, which is from Axios, is out there saying, well, the message these airstrikes are sending is that in point of fact, ISIS has not been defeated. Bad president, no cookie. Things are getting really kind of tense around Turkey because with the U.S. withdrawal from Syria, it is looking like the U.S. has basically abandoned the Kurds. It was a short-term relationship, if you will, and it looks like the party may be over. So apparently, responding to a Twitter outburst from Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, who called President Erdogan the occupier of northern Cyprus and accused his forces of massacring women and children in the Kurdish villages. Basically, Ankara came on back and said they don't need permission from Israel or anyone to fight terror. Now, France is reportedly promising the Kurdish SDF support following the U.S. withdrawal from Syria. This has angered Ankara, that's warning France against supporting the U.S.-backed Kurdish militia. So that's another area of friction that could get really, really ugly. Meanwhile, Turkey is massing tanks on the Syrian border as Erdogan prepares to move against the Kurds after the U.S. leaves. And apparently, Erdogan's forces were pictured arriving in border cities of Kilis and Al-Ray after the country's foreign minister said they will push into Syria as soon as possible. Now, Turkey says they're going to take over the fight against ISIS, but they're also going to go after the Kurds. Now, here's an interesting little development. This is coming from Fars News. Apparently, Iran and Russia are working toward widening their military cooperation. Chief of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, Major General Mohammad Hossein Bagheri, underlined the need for Tehran and Moscow to increase their military cooperation, adding that both countries are determined to confront existing threats. Now, obviously, this is going to complicate things for the United States, which may be repositioning forces for for that long-anticipated, much-desired war against Iran. Because Russia may be getting ready to do in Syria, or rather in Iran, what they did in Syria, which is to simply hold off the invasion, which is what Russia successfully did. They prevented the United States from taking over the country, and they may be they may be prepared to do the same thing in Iran. Meanwhile, the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps is holding military drills in the Persian Gulf. The maneuvers are aimed at showcasing their newest defense capabilities and deterring potential threats posed by their enemies. Apparently, they showcase sophisticated communication systems, radars, tanks, and infantry fighting vehicles. Okay, last week we had a story that kind of came and went, and it did unfortunately go viral. And it was a claim that came from a website with a less than wonderful reputation that Iran patrol boats had fired rockets at the USS John C. Stennis aircraft carrier, which arrived in the Persian Gulf last Friday. Now, the reason I didn't run the story is it didn't make any sense. Iran does not want to provoke anything. And so my little weirdo meter said, I'm not believing this one. But apparently there's been a statement from the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, Navy Rear Admiral Ali-Razi Tangsiri, who said, no, nobody fired rockets near the John C. Stennis. It's a hoax. It's fake news. He added that the IRGC vessels monitored the U.S. fleet. It further stressed the Iranian drone's capability to monitor any foreign vessel which enters the region. He says their goal is to defend the waters of Iran, and we are present in the region with strength and full intelligence superiority. Now, Deputy Chief of Iran's Army for Coordination, Rear Admiral Habibullah Sayari, has made the remark once again that U.S. warships are not to approach or enter Iran's territorial waters, and said that as far as he was concerned, the presence of the USS John C. Stennis is insignificant. Said they're prepared to deal with it. It's a little bit of tough talk, I think, here. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif is saying Tehran will not stand by for Europeans to fulfill their commitments under a multilateral nuclear agreement signed between Iran and 6 major world powers in 2015, following the United States' move to simply pull out of the deal. And Zarif said the Europeans are acting very slowly in the fulfillment of their commitments under the agreement. And he says Iran is not going to wait around for them unless they adopt practical steps. Now, whether that means Iran is getting ready to pull out of the deal or not remains to be seen. Over in Libya, their foreign ministry in the capital of Tripoli was attacked by suicide attackers who stormed the Libyan foreign ministry in the capital, Tripoli, yesterday, killing at least 3 people, including a senior civil servant, in an attack claimed by ISIS. There's your false flag. And 21 people were wounded in the attack. A car bomb exploded near the ministry, prompting security forces to rush to the scene. A suicide bomber then blew himself up on the 2nd floor of the building, while a second attacker died when a suitcase he was carrying exploded. So, yeah, we can expect something spectacular in the name of ISIS. Okay, we're going to take a break here for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, up in Oregon, there was a tragic incident where this Saudi national, Abdul Rahman Samir Noura, who was apparently arrested all the way back in August 2016 and indicted for first-degree manslaughter, hit and run, reckless endangerment, and reckless driving, after killing 15-year-old Fallon Smart in Portland, Oregon. And apparently, Noura's $100,000 bond was posted by the Consulate of Saudi Arabia, and in early June of 2017, he removed his monitoring device and vanished. His whereabouts were thought to be unknown until U.S. officials learned from the Saudi government he had returned to the kingdom. This was reported in the Oregonian. So basically, the Saudi government helped a felon to escape justice in this country. Now, Saudi Arabia's done a lot of things that people are very upset about. The war in Yemen, Khashoggi, and there is now a growing movement, a campaign, if you will, to boycott Saudi products, along with the boycott divestment sanctions against Israel. Now they want to basically boycott Saudi-made products. Now, a number of Saudi-made products are actually American goods, just manufactured on Saudi soil. And apparently they're going to launch a Twitter storm, basically pointing people at the boycott. And remember, boycotts are a recognized form of peaceful protest. Okay. Apparently, John Bolton is coming down heavy-handed with Africa through AFRICOM's massive military infiltration of the area. And he's now saying that Africa has to make a choice between the U.S. and China. Now, as you know, China has built a couple of bases in Africa, and the United States is now telling Africa, you have to get out. Or rather, you have to choose. China has to leave, one or the other. Wouldn't it be embarrassing if Africa said, you know, we're going to go with the Chinese because they're actually building stuff and America's just blowing it up? Now, this comes hard on the heels of Donald Trump tweeting out over Chinese attempts to gain a competitive advantage in Africa through practices that supposedly include bribes, opaque arrangements, and the strategic use of debt to hold states in Africa captive. And by golly, that's our job. That's what the United States does. Hold nations in debt to control them. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, all of a sudden, every Chinese device has a monitoring system in it. You know, what a load, Mike. Like this is a desperate empire, Mike. You know, like this is where we're at. You know, they know they're in decline because they're pulling all these. I mean, this is World War II stuff with Japan and Germany.
Yes.
You know, blame them, right? Fox News is doing it. Right? CNN, MSNBC, they're all on the same page now with this also, with the Chinese, Russia, right?
Yep.
See? Yeah, it's all leading to one thing, because every day they're getting stronger and we're getting weaker. You know, just look at the stock market, up and down, up and down, up and down, right?
Well, they certainly had a good day today.
Yeah, well, I didn't even when it ended, but, I don't think it's going to last, though. By the last couple of weeks.
Well, it opened at 200, then it went into the red by quite a wide margin, and then something happened to just shove it up to over 1,000. And I suspect the plunge protection team may have been deployed on this one.
Wasn't that odd that Steve Mnuchin called on his vacation Sunday?
Yeah.
On that conference? Dang, that's a bizarre moment. Yeah. That something must have spooked them to make that call, the conference call. But hey, Mike, when's the last time an Iranian person drove over somebody over here and fled the country and it happens to either Israel or Saudi Arabia. They flee to their countries of origin there. It's like, but you won't hear that on the news. If it was an Iranian that did it, Mike, it would have been front page the Iranians drove over an American citizen and they're holding their, I mean, it's, and you know what, Mike, nothing's going to be done. That guy's not coming back. Do you think that guy's coming back?
No, of course he's not coming back. You know, he's happy at his home. Okay, Dustin, we have got to take another commercial break. I want to hold you over, so don't hang up, and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're getting an update about President Trump's visit to the troops in Iraq. He has announced there will be no troop withdrawal from Iraq, and then he followed it with this odd comment that the U.S. could use Iraq as a base from which to conduct operations in Syria. So it looks like Syria is not off the table after all. All right, we're talking with Dustin in New Jersey, and Dustin, yeah, we're if you were my age, you would recall the kind of corporate media propaganda that was constantly just hammering into our heads why we had to be afraid of the Soviets, why we had to be afraid of China, why we had to go into Vietnam, and it was just selling that war and selling it over and over, and I'm seeing it all over again. History may not repeat, but it's certainly rhyming.
And afraid of your own citizens, too. You know, it's divide and conquer kind of crap, you know. Be afraid of the people who are against transgenders and gays, or be afraid of the patriots. And, you know, it's a typical, it's the same playbook. You know, dates and times change, the playbook stays the same, right?
Yes, very much so. I'm still trying to figure out, which is precisely why Israel did it. And, you know, Russia's complaining that, Israel placed those passenger planes at risk. And under the normal rules of warfare, you're not supposed to expose civilians to danger. Of course, unfortunately, the United States and Israel are bombing civilians left and right. So what's two more plane loads full?
It will be at the UN. Veto, 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 veto.
Yep, they will be. I mean, you would think Israel would be a little more reticent because of the political fallout from the shoot down of that Ilyushin 20 a while back that was basically caused by Israel flying into Syria, and they may have even used that plane for radar cover to discourage Syria from shooting at them. And Russia is saying that Israel did not give sufficient advance notice of the raid where Russia could get that plane safely on the ground.
Well, there's talk now maybe Moscow is going to extend the range for the missile umbrella there. You know,
there may be, because, like I said, the S-300s are not actually in active service yet. Apparently, there have been delays in the training, but they are expected to go into active service sometime between the middle of next month and February. So if Israel really is going to do something, it's going to be in the next couple of weeks here. And they may just go ahead with a decapitation strike against Assad himself.
They got Syria's got the Tor and the Panzer S-1, so the Panzer probably took out most of those. Majority of those F-16 launched missiles.
Yes.
And Mike, one real quick thing: did you see the final test for the Avangard? Because it's going into production in 2019.
Yeah, I didn't actually see it. I understand Putin was there for the test, and it went really well. It flies at Mach 20. That's almost orbital speed. And it combines a ballistic missile with one of these hypersonic gliders, which actually delivers the payload to the target. And so that's a nasty piece of work, because it can easily evade all of the United States ballistic missile defense systems. And
Poseidon's going to start their second phase of testing. That's the underwater drone that can deliver a 50 and 100 megaton. That's I guess the last resort weapon. That has a cobalt casing supposedly too. So if you don't want to use that, be on the side of on the coast.
No, you definitely don't want to do that. And I question the claim that this is going to have a 50 to 100 megaton warhead. The Russians only ever built one 100 megaton bomb, and they did it basically as a technology demonstrator. And when they set it off, they were so afraid of it, they dialed it back to 50 megatons, and the scar it left on the Earth is still visible in Google Earth. I would say, in all probability, you're looking at most 3 to 5 megatons as a deliverable weapon.
Yeah, can that be fit into some kind of submersible like that size? I mean, that thing's huge. I mean, can they shrink it? You know, like, I mean, something like that. Can you shrink something like that? Like from that 50 to a meg, you know, the Tsar bomb to something smaller? Because it's been a long time.
Well, the Tsar bomb was built in an earlier age where nuclear weapons were built large, but they've been modernized over the years, and warheads are now, powerful warheads are now small enough to fit inside a reentry vehicle on like the Trident missile. So yeah, they're very small.
I think that's 50 to 100 mega. That's kind of overkill, don't you think?
Yeah, that's why I'm questioning it.
But all right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And getting on back to the news here, over in Brussels, apparently a man opened fire at a restaurant in central Brussels with a Kalashnikov. Fortunately, nobody was hurt. Apparently, he just fired 3 rounds through the window and then made his escape. The police are saying they don't believe it's a terrorist attack. They're not going to rule it out just yet, but they think there may be another motive there. But Brussels, at least that part of Brussels, is on lockdown here. Okay, Moscow does not exclude that in the coming days the Ukrainian army may move to full-scale hostilities in the Donbass. This is coming from Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova. And apparently last week in an interview, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov expressed concern about the strengthening of the Ukrainian armed forces grouping in the Donbass, as well as Kiev's active preparations for possible military actions against the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics. And according to him, such steps of the Ukrainian authorities are aimed primarily at organizing armed provocations on the contact line, as well as on the Russian-Ukrainian border in the region of Crimea. Now, maybe not, because there's this Ukrainian general, former defense minister of Ukraine, Alexander Kuzmuk, on a television interview saying that Ukraine has lost the political support of Western countries because Ukraine does nothing but create problems for them. And Kuzmuk said it's not easy to make a frank assessment, and it's not a positive one. Says the message that they're getting from Western countries is that Kiev needs to start solving its own problems on its own. So he's basically saying that Poroshenko is without political support. Now, maybe he's going to start wars in the Eastern republics as a cover for the fact that things are so bad in Ukraine, or maybe it'll give him pause. And what's really interesting, Poroshenko has now ended the martial law that was imposed following the Kerch Strait incident. The earlier talk had been that he was going to ask for an extension, and instead he said, no, it's over. He's terminating the period of martial law imposed in several regions of the country. So that is a positive sign as well. Over in Russia, they are expanding their list of Ukrainian individuals and companies under counter sanctions. Looks like Russia is learning how to play that sanction game as well, but they learned at the feet of a master, the United States. And Dmitry Medvedev has signed a decree expanding the list of these individuals and entities under counter sanctions, and saying there are special restrictive measures to be applied against them. This was done to protect interests of the Russian state, companies, and citizens of Russia. Now, last November 1st, Medvedev had signed a decree introducing special economic measures against 322 Ukrainian citizens and 68 companies. So, Germany has issued a very stern warning. This is coming from Germany's Foreign Minister Heiko Maas, saying that the United States should not even think about placing nuclear missiles in Europe after pulling out of the INF Treaty. And obviously he's concerned about a fully blown Cold War-style nuclear arms race, as Russia is already saying they'll build up their tactical defenses along Europe's periphery in the face of what's expected to be a buildup of American intermediate-range arms. But whatever happens between the U.S. and Russia, Germany wants no part of it. And he's asking everybody to come back to the table and try and get back to the INF Treaty. So for 30 years, the treaty has prohibited stationing intermediate-range arms in Europe. Any push to change that would be met with widespread resistance in Germany. So at least there's one calm and cool head. Down in Israel, they're agreeing to early elections. They'll be April 9th of the coming year here. And apparently, the stall came over this bill on the military draft of ultra-Orthodox men. Up until now, they have been exempt from Israel's military service because of how strict their religion is. But it's caused a real split in Israel. It's caused a real split in the Knesset. And so now it looks like the Knesset, the coalition government, is on the verge of collapse. Now, some of that is good, some of that is bad. What's bad about it is it allows Netanyahu to unilaterally make military decisions without having to go before the Knesset. And right now, between his corruption allegations and living conditions in Israel, he might decide a good war is going to solve his problems. Others have a different opinion. Over in Press TV, Palestinian lawmaker Mustafa Berghouti told the Associated Press that in dissolving parliament, early elections, they are proof of Israel's great failure. And it does look like their government is becoming just as factionalized and unstable as our own. Chris Hedges is out there describing Israel as frightened and desperate. They've lost control of the narrative. People are not buying the propaganda anymore. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement is really taking off. And Israel is very, very concerned that more and more people are starting to question the Holocaust. By the way, our military command has just issued an order to all military people that they will not question the Orthodox account of World War II. They will not question the 6 million. It is now a violation of the rules for them to do so. So somebody really is afraid somewhere. And even with the federal government shutdown and the argument over the border wall, the senators are still trying to sneak in that amendment to the spending bill that would make an Israel boycott illegal. And if they succeed, some public interest group, probably Judicial Watch, is going to have to go right to the Supreme Court and say, this is a violation of the First Amendment. Boycotts are a recognized form of peaceful protest protected by the First Amendment. Okay, over in Korea, more than 1,000 South Koreans filed a lawsuit demanding financial compensation for their forced labor in World War II by the Japanese. But they didn't sue Tokyo. They sued their own government in Seoul because apparently, years ago, Japan actually sent money to compensate these South Koreans, and the government in Seoul never got around to distributing it. So now there's a lawsuit that will hopefully get things back together for them. Senator Rand Paul is praising Donald Trump for doing exactly what he promised by withdrawing U.S. troops from Syria. and derided all the armchair generals in Washington who want to stay at war forever because it's fun and it's profitable here. And on State of the Union, Rand Paul said he's very proud of Trump's determination to get troops out of the Middle East. Well, again, Rand, it's a good sign. The question is, where are those troops going? Are they really coming home, or are they going someplace else? China has rolled out its latest combat drone. It's called the Wing Lung 1D Combat Unmanned Aerial Vehicle. It can carry over 10 different types of weapons, up to 800 pounds, and can stay in the air 35 hours without refueling. And apparently it's an all-composite design, and China plans to sell it to customers worldwide. So they've nicknamed it the Pterosaur, and apparently it can be armed with the BA-7 air-to-ground missile, the YZ-212 laser-guided bomb, the YZ-102 a killing bomb, and the 50-kilogram LS-6 miniature guided bombs. This is going to put a real crimp on Israel's drone sales, because that sounds like a real winner over there here. Little bit of an article that came on out here from VoltaireNet talking about Japan's recent militarization and saying that the Japanese army is now as strong as it was in the Second World War. Well, that could be inconvenient, except, of course, they lost the Second World War. So I'm hoping we're not going to see them stir up some trouble. But it just feels like everybody wants to go to war, and they're just waiting for a starting time here. Speaking of war, another article, this is out of Al Jazeera, is talking about the global arms trade network. Arms are big, big business. It's worth about $100 billion a year. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. So we're talking about the global arms trade network. A lot of it above board, the big arms shows where the deals are made for the weapons. Then, of course, there is the dark world of underground arms trading, the shadow world. And somebody apparently put together a documentary based on Andrew Feinstein's book, revealing some of the largest and most corrupt arms deals in history. Now, if you ever saw the movie Charlie Wilson's War, you'll remember that sequence where Charlie Wilson flew to Israel and purchased weapons Israel had captured in order that they would be untraceable back to the United States. So that's the way these things work. Now, Great Britain is the largest arms producer in Western Europe. It's also a top exporter of arms to Saudi Arabia. The most notable deal between the British and Saudi Arabia is the Al Yamama arms deal, in which British weapons manufacturer BAE Systems was the main contractor. And that goes back to 1985. So when they say that war is good for business, it's certainly good for the weapons business, but not much else here. All right, let's talk about our domestic politics here. As you know, last week Michael Flynn was supposed to be sentenced, and instead the judge has delayed the sentencing into next year. And it basically shows how far Robert Mueller is willing to go to destroy President Trump. Because apparently the whole point of this waiting period is to put more pressure on Flynn to cooperate with the Mueller investigation. By basically, they're trying to get him to lie here. Okay, a couple of weeks ago, there was this story about how an entire floor of the court in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Court of Appeals, literally closed off the entire fifth floor, and now we're getting some more information. Apparently, Chief Justice John Roberts, has blocked a contempt citation imposed by a D.C. federal court in a secret case supposedly involving the Mueller investigation. And this is an extraordinary action that could lead to the first secret Supreme Court hearing in American history. So now we're getting into Star Chamber territory, and that's a dangerous sign. But Mueller's probe, which was supposed to be about investigating Trump's election, but has just spread everywhere, apparently issued this subpoena to a foreign corporation owned by some unknown foreign state to testify before the federal grand jury. Now, the corporation objected to that subpoena, claiming it is immune from compulsory process under the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. And that statute is the sole basis for U.S. courts claiming jurisdiction over a foreign government, including, in this case, a corporation owned by a foreign government. But it's all hush-hush, and apparently, to keep it that way, when they went to the U.S. Court of Appeals, they literally closed off the entire fifth floor. This was back on December 14. And apparently, they confirmed Howell's decision, but we still don't know what corporation or who owns it. Okay, we're going to take a break here for station identification. We'll be right back with hour number 2. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, do you remember last June, Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi was harassed, cursed at, threatened, and spit on when she went to watch a movie at a Florida theater? And basically, when she was talking about it afterwards on Fox, she said these 3 huge guys came up to her, started screaming at her and cursing her an inch from her face. And apparently the leftist then turned on her boyfriend, tried to provoke a physical altercation. So this was back when conservatives were being harassed by liberals. Now, apparently, last Wednesday, the Daily Caller Foundation revealed the group behind the assault on Pam Bondi received funding by a George Soros organization. Apparently, this group that harassed Attorney General Pam Bondi received $500,000 in 2017 from an organization funded by George Soros. And the Daily Caller's got the documents on that. So, yeah, it's all staged. It's all bought and paid for. All of these crazies who were screaming at various conservatives, they were hired to do that. They don't represent the grassroots view of these people here. Now, a lot of people are looking forward to this upcoming grand jury. And last spring, the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, along with more than a dozen 9/11 family members and with help from architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, filed a petition with the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan demanding that he present evidence of unprosecuted federal crimes at the World Trade Center to a special grand jury. Then in November came the news. The U.S. Attorney notified the Lawyers Committee in writing that he would comply with the provisions of Title 18 U.S. Code Section 3332, requiring him to relay their report to the special grand jury. He doesn't have an option. Nobody can call it up. Well, a lot of people are out there saying, well, we're finally going to get to see the truth about 9/11. I wouldn't get out the balloons just yet, because you know the people behind 9/11, they're going to be working to find some way to shut this down, or to hijack it, or to scare the grand jurors, or bribe the grand jurors. They're in a position. They can't let this go forward. If it goes forward and this special grand jury comes on out and says, yes, we are seeing evidence that explosives were used in the destruction of the World Trade Tower, it's all going to come apart. And of course, the corporate media won't report it, but it'll be all over the independent media. I wish them luck. I hope it works. But they're definitely up against the varsity on this one. Okay, as we've already mentioned several times today, it was a good day for the stock markets. All three of them way up, erased the losses from earlier in the week. And the main problem right now, though, for Donald Trump seems to be the Federal Reserve. And apparently Trump came on out with a tweet about the Federal Reserve, which prompted David Rockefeller to respond to him, saying that Trump should just shut up. Every time he talks about the Federal Reserve, the markets get roiled. Well, yeah, they do. That market surge is being funded with very cheap money. Even CNBC's Jim Cramer is saying that Federal Reserve Chairman Powell is Trump's worst nightmare. So maybe it's time for a good house cleaning there, Don. Meanwhile, for most Americans, debt is still up. Debt is up 1.37 trillion since last year, $10,743 per household. The Democrats are pushing the largest expansion of government since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This is coming from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's pushing for a Green New Deal. And she's out there talking it up. She's comparing it to the Great Society of the 1960s. And this Green New Deal is about enforcing the agenda of human-caused global warming and bring about what they see as economic, social, and racial justice. It's going to be a real mess. But this will be the largest, if they get it through, it's going to be the largest expansion of the federal government into our lives since FDR here. All right, well, as you know, Christmas is over. It's Boxing Day. And it turns out that Americans spent $850 billion on Christmas. And that probably is a good thing for the retail giants, but apparently much of that $850 billion was plunked on the credit cards. And so we have all this new debt on top of the existing debt. And so that's not really necessarily a good thing. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. As you heard last week, Malaysian authorities have filed criminal charges against 3 subsidiaries of Goldman Sachs in connection with the U.S. investment bank's involvement in a sprawling scandal that saw billions of dollars embezzled from State Fund 1MDB, Malaysia Development Berhad. And this apparently has shaken public confidence in Goldman Sachs as to wondering just what the heck that it is doing out there. A lot of people are looking into 2019 and they're saying there are going to be hard times. A lot of it has to do with the debt, which is becoming unpayable on several levels. Obviously the Fed is cranking up the prime rate. That's having repercussions here. So between 1951 to 2007, U.S. debt increased at a rate of 8.8% per year. The rate from 2008 to 2017 has only been 2.6% per year. So we've reached debt saturation. In other words, people can't or won't borrow anymore. The little kerfuffle going on between China and Canada is definitely heating up, and China is rejecting calls for the release of all the detained Canadians, of which there are, as of last count, 3. And this is Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, who are being held in detention. And apparently it's just 2 Canadians. My mistake on that one. Now, gold hit a 6-month peak during the recent downturn in the stock market. I haven't taken a look at the price today to see how it's reacting to the soaring Dow. But they do tend to be kind of inverse to each other. Over at Wells Fargo, which is the third largest United States bank, they may have outsourced hundreds of Americans' jobs to foreign countries after laying off U.S. workers this year. Now, an analysis done by the Charlotte Observer's Dion Roberts reveals how the multinational bank laid off hundreds of American workers and sent their jobs overseas. Apparently, about 650 American workers with Wells Fargo were laid off from their jobs in Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Washington. At the same time Americans were being laid off, Wells Fargo announced it would hire an additional 7,000 workers in the Philippines to add to its 4,000 strong workforce in the country. This is something that Donald Trump really needs to look at. But Donald Trump himself, I don't know. This doesn't really look good. But according to this article that came on out from Station Gossip, Trump is planning on using his executive powers to cut food stamps for more than 700,000 Americans. Merry Christmas. Happy Boxing Day here. Apparently, federal workers are already complaining that they're feeling the pinch from the federal shutdown. I can just imagine the whining and crying if this stretches through January and into February, which it actually could here. Turning back over to China and the trade war, it's becoming a lot more complicated. It's not just a trade war. Apparently at issue are the high-tech electronic devices it's about retaining and advancing U.S. tech leadership in chip evolution, quantum computing, big data, and artificial intelligence for weaponry. So they want to bring that all back here to the United States, which I'm in agreement with. I'm definitely in agreement with on that one here. The downside, of course, is that a trade war raises the specter of a new Cold War with China. And of course, that's exactly what the defense contractors would like to have. So, apparently Chinese middle classes are fretting with anxiety ahead of 2019 amid growing economic uncertainty due to a slowing GDP growth and unprecedented trade war with the United States. It's getting tense out there. Now, a story that came on out of Press TV is talking about James Petrus, who's a retired professor. He's published on political issues with particular focus in Latin America, the Middle East, and imperialism. And apparently, his analysis of what's going on is that Donald Trump wants to reorient American policy toward building up the domestic economy in order to compete with China. In other words, China's a manufacturing powerhouse. We all know that. Trump wants to turn the United States into a manufacturing powerhouse. I would like to see that. It's going to take a long time. We've been allowing our manufacturing and our technology to decline going back 30 years. And it's not like we can just walk back into those factories and flip the lights on. Because in many cases, the factories are corroded. The machinery has either been sold off or it's been allowed to just rot away. So it's going to take a long, long process to rebuild our manufacturing. But we got to have it. A successful economy means you have product to sell. Now, apparently, Mnuchin may be in some trouble because apparently he acted on his own initiative regarding the plunge protection team calls. And he didn't clear that with Donald Trump. And apparently Donald Trump is very upset over that. And some people are saying that Mnuchin may be the next one to go. All right. Here's an interesting little story. This came out of Zero Hedge. About 1/3 of natural-born Americans are ready to call it quits, pack up their stuff, and move to other countries at some point in the future. And apparently it's the economic hardship, and it's also the result of the illegal immigrants and the refugees. And they're just deciding that America just isn't livable anymore. It's not the country it used to be, and they absolutely did. I was a little surprised by that. 1/3. That is major, major, major. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, a couple of things. One, I wouldn't get too excited about the stock market. I mean, this is not a healthy stock market. It goes up hundreds of points, and it goes up, down hundreds of points. It goes down 1,000 points. It goes back, down hundreds. That's not a healthy. There's something, there's manipulation going on. That's all it is.
Of course there is.
The other thing is what you were saying about Wells Fargo laying off those employees and hiring all these foreigners. See, this is where Trump, instead of worrying about, for instance, putting sanctions and tariffs on all these countries, what he should do is put the sanctions on American companies like Wells Fargo and just raise their corporate taxes. I would double or triple their corporate taxes until they bring those American jobs back, period. And anything, that you don't get away with, with outsourcing. It's not only takes away American jobs, it's also very inconvenient because, like I said, if I want to get something done, for instance, with what am I, call up about, let's say, a Sirius XM. I'm always talking to somebody in the Philippines, in South America, somewhere like that. A lot of times with some of the cable stations, the same thing. You're not talking to an American. You're talking to somebody in some other country. You got to crush these companies. That's what he's got to do. Destroy them if you have to. They have no business doing this. It's unpatriotic. It's greedy. It's filthy. It's globalist. Destroy them if you have to. That's what I would do if I was president. I would put them. You want to do this? What you're doing? I say this is an obscenity, and I'm going to crush you. I'm going to tax you like I'm going to raise your corporate taxes 2, 3, 4 times what it is now. The same thing with roboting. With the robots. When you replace American workers with these robots and stuff like that, I say, okay, fine. You want to do that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to tax you each worker that you replace with a robot. I'm going to tax that robot 5 times what you would pay that worker. Okay, so you still want to use robots to replace human beings? Go right ahead and try. That's what Trump should do. Then I'd really respect him if he did some stuff like that. I'm glad he's pulling the troops out of Syria, but he needs to pull troops out of everywhere we got in the world. We don't need troops anywhere but in the United States protecting this country. Other than that, I don't know. What do you think about that, what I said?
Well, I'm certainly in agreement with the issue about robots and displacement of American workers, whether their jobs are offshored or they're replaced by robots. I think this last Christmas has really revealed that Americans are running out of money. They just really are. Claire was talking to a taxi driver before the Christmas holiday and asked him if he'd done his Christmas shopping, and he said, I can't do Christmas shopping, there's no money. And we're hearing that from a lot of people. And I noticed very clearly when I went to take out the trash, there wasn't a lot of gift giving yesterday, and it was all small stuff. Really inexpensive stuff here. Now, as far as taxing Wells Fargo, the downside of that is Wells Fargo could just decide they're going to pull up stakes here in the United States and move someplace else. Of course, they would still have to have their banks here, but they could shift their corporate headquarters to the Philippines and pay their taxes over there.
Well, we could charge them any property they have in the United States, and we could increase their taxes. There's ways of dealing with them. On top of that, we could then subsidize another bank to take over Wells Fargo, so we don't need them anymore. You know, there's always ways he could do things, but you have to have iron will to do it, and you got to be able to stand up to the lobbyists, and you got to understand. I don't look at capitalism as a religion as some people do. Capitalism is just another, it's just another theory. Now, we've got what we've got now is not real capitalism anyway. We've got a predatory style of capitalism, which is, to me, is as bad or worse than socialism. Okay, that's
it's fascism,
and we got to stop it. Huh?
It's fascism.
To a degree, you could say it's fascism. Yeah, you could say that too. Yeah, I call it predatory capitalism because what happens is you get these big corporations, these big rich corporations, these billionaires and stuff. They buy up the government. In all intents and purposes, they own the government.
Yes,
they have way too much. They contribute to money.
Well, that's
for,
what fascism is, when corporate interest and government power are united against the general population. Anyway, Mark, got to take a commercial break. Got to let you go here. Got another caller waiting on the line. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. This shutdown thing. You know what I really like about Trump is his ability to fight fights that no other Republican would ever do. His ability to go up against political correctness. His ability to go up against the Me Too movement and not fold with that whole Billy Bush thing.
Yes.
His ability to stand by Kavanaugh. And this shutdown, for years, ever since Newt Gingrich caved, the fear of a shutdown is really, if Trump can slay that dragon for the country, it'll be remarkable and it'll be brilliant politically for him, and it'll also be great for the country. This fear, everybody quakes in their boots about a shutdown, and it's all media manipulated, deep state Washington smoke and mirrors. It's like the Wizard of Oz. There's no real truth to it. I think the longer Trump keeps this government down, the better his ratings will be. If I was him, I'd offer him. I think they say that he offered him $2.5 billion, and any week after that, I'd raise it to $3 billion, then $3.5 billion, then $4 billion, because you're going to see he's going to beat the Democrats on this as long as he doesn't cave and as long as he doesn't get bad advice from any deep state, aides and people around him.
I agree with you, and Trump is still indicating that he intends to stand firm. The spending bill will have the wall, or he will not sign it. Now, the only people who are justified in being shocked and horrified at the government shutdown are the people who work in those various departments of the government that are now closed. For everybody else out here in the private sector, the only reason we're concerned about the government shutdown is that we've been brainwashed to think that without the federal government, our lives will end miserably. And that's simply not true. In fact, quite the opposite. I was one of the European countries, I think Belgium, went an entire year without a central federal government. And things worked out wonderfully over there. So we'll see what happens.
Well, the Democrats and the media and the rhinos, they're the government party. And Donald Trump doesn't have their support. So I hope Donald Trump remembers and realizes that his supporters and the great majority of the silent majority of the American people aren't part of the government party. We're working in private industry. We're not on that government teat. We're not getting those phony baloney government jobs. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of resentment to these government people. There's a lot of resentment to these huge pension funds they get, where they're bankrupting all these states, all these liberal Democrat states that give their bus drivers $150,000 a year pensions. I mean, it's incredible what these people, the way they're abusing the system. So Trump, this is a big set-up victory for him. All he's got to do is follow through on it, and I really hope he does. I'd like to make a quick comment, though, on Trump getting rid of Mattis and just the whole media chaos. This hysteria, I've never seen anything like it. Any channel you turned on, it was the biggest freak out I've ever seen. And it's really, they talk about Trump being the chaos person, they're the ones that are sowing the hysteria. They're the ones on TV screaming like the world's coming to an end. I've never seen anything like it, and I don't know how people can really tolerate it anymore and take them seriously. It's really obnoxious.
Well, if you look at the viewership numbers for the corporate news media, people aren't tolerating it. They're turning off all their TV sets and they're getting their news from someplace else, which is a very healthy thing.
Well, I just don't understand how they can produce a product like this and not have any like their feet on the ground, any realistic sense of what they're doing, and how a person that's not totally brainwashed by them can just almost get sick to their stomach watching what they're producing. And another thing I'd like to say is about General Mattis. You know, I kind of had some respect for him, but the way he resigned like a little pouty baby. You know, you'd think a general, a Marine general, wouldn't pout and resign in a little snit like a little schoolgirl. You know, so to me, he just lost any bit of respect. I mean, you're supposed to go out with some dignity. You don't have to write, you know, it's like quitting and giving like a big speech and making a big show about it. You know, I can expect that from like schoolgirls and homosexuals or whoever. But to see a general, a Marine general who's got this reputation of being a tough guy, to pull the rug out and try to embarrass his president and do that like that, I really think it's sickening. And I would love to just I hear rumors he might run, and I just like to go and boo him and call him a little pussy, excuse my French, because that's what he is to me now.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm in agreement with you, and there's certainly going to be a lot of candidates for 2020. They're lining up on both sides now. It's going to be a heck of a circus, even worse than 2016 was. Okay, Joe, anything else?
Well, yeah, you know, I've been watching these things with the Wall Street and the economy, and I'm kind of the opinion that Trump should allow the economy to collapse and control the collapse while he's got the muscle. You know, while we have our guy in charge,
that would definitely have panic in the streets. Anyway, Joe, got to do another commercial break. Got to let you go. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we take a phone call, a couple of things I want to remind everybody about. That front site promotion ends midnight this coming Monday. So you're running out of time. If you've been procrastinating, got to get out of that. Get over there, sign up. Okay. Also, I've been corrected by a listener. I was talking about how Trump was tweeting out about the Federal Reserve, and he was given a very rude response. It wasn't David Rockefeller, it was David Rothschild. And he just had this meltdown on Twitter, so I got the names wrong on that. Okay, let's take another phone call. Ken in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Welcome back, Mike.
Thank you.
About shutting the government down. This may be part of the brainwashing. I had heard several years ago on the mainstream media that no matter what you do to shut the government down, 80% of it was deemed, I love that word, be necessary and therefore not subject to this type of shutdown.
Well, the parts that get shut down are the parts that we, the American people, want. Museums, national parks, although I understand Sequoia Kings Canyon is still open. The parts that stay up and running are all the regulatory agencies that, frankly, all of us could do without. So that's the way that works.
Yes, and that was the point. They seem to pick the parts that annoy people and grind us down the most. Like I had heard that there was a group of veterans on their way to see a memorial of some sort, and they were turned away.
Yep, that's sort of thing's going to happen. Basically, it may be a government shutdown, but they're basically punishing the American people with it.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we're going to switch over to Art off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, you know that before I get to what I called about, you know, government shutdown. They talk, you know, that's really what they call non-essential personnel. Well, look at what they call non-essential, and then look at what they call essential. Kind of, they got things kind of flipped a little bit around there, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Anyway, you mentioned how Belgium, what did they do? I think they were the ones. They shut down the banks and took back control of their economy. Now we have another country, Hungary. They built a series of fences, creating a nice little border barrier there.
Yes.
And they almost eliminated illegal immigration.
Yes.
Simply by building a series of fences. Okay? Now, these are countries, we like to think that our nation has experienced the greatest liberty of all nations throughout the history of man. Well, if that be the case, then why are we being outdone by countries like Belgium and Hungary when we should be doing what they're doing, which is what any truly sovereign nation would do?
Well, the problem is we have the liberals and the globalists, they don't want what Hungary is doing. They're still pushing for open borders and blending everybody together. They want one planet, one government, one private central bank with which to enslave humanity until the sun swallows the planet Earth. And there seem to be a lot of people on board with this. And as far as the liberals are concerned, the reason they don't want the border wall is they count on those illegal immigrants to vote them back into power, even though illegal immigrants aren't supposed to vote. The Democratic Party has gone outlaw. They're not playing by the rules anymore.
Yep. It's topsy-turvy world we live in. Anyway, I'll let you get on with it, man. Take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Yeah, it's a banana republic is what we're living in. The law is what the rulers say it is. Okay, over in Indonesia, the world's biggest gold mine has now been nationalized. It took 2 years of negotiations to do. And the government and U.S. mineral giant Freeport-McMoRan Copper and Gold have finally concluded an agreement effectively nationalizing Indonesia's most prized mining asset in the mountains of easternmost Papua. And apparently this mine it produces some of the most gold and copper in the entire world here. It's the most profitable gold and copper mine. So good for Indonesia getting back control of its assets here. One of Russia's state-run banking giants that has been sanctioned by the U.S., Promsvizbank, has brought its security deposits payable to international payment systems, Visa and MasterCard, down to a minimum. They're getting ready to basically shut off from those credit cards. And they're going to implement it by converting domestic banking transactions to Russia's Mir payment system, launched by the Central Bank of Russia in 2015, a year after the Western sanctions against the country were introduced. Russia's ninth biggest financial institution has also reduced its foreign exchange holdings of dollars. In fact, they pretty much cut them in half here. So Bundestag's Foreign Affairs Committee, actually one of its members, Jürgen Tritten, came on out and basically said that the Nord Stream 2 project will result in EU-Russia interdependence. And he said the argument that the European countries will be forced to depend on Russia is wrong, because he said producers are even more dependent on the customers, since the latter has other sources of energy supplies. So all this fear-mongering about Nord Stream 2 seems to have been more fake news. But of course, the United States doesn't want Europe buying Russian oil and gas. The United States wants Europe buying oil and gas from countries that are friendly to the United States, or American liquefied natural gas, which they ship across the Atlantic here. Now, over in Iraq, Apparently, they're a major Middle East grain importer, and they have decided to purchase Russia's durum wheat. This is coming from agricultural watchdog Russell Conadzor, and basically concluded a deal with officials from the Iraqi Trade Ministry. And I imagine that it's not only a combination of getting a better deal for the wheat, but remember, Russia went totally non-GMO, and Iraq may be thinking about that as well. Okay, we have another caller, Mark in Montana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Mike. I have a question for you. Do you even know that the government's partially shut down?
I would have no way of knowing if I would have no way of knowing if it wasn't all over the TV set.
Yeah, and I don't know on TV. I didn't even know it was going on until I kind of got a message or something from logged into my Facebook account that's been deactivated. I'm out here in the oil field. I'm keeping the oil flowing. I'm going to get off work here in a couple hours, and after 14 or 15 hours, I'm going to go buy a beer, go back to my man camp, and get up tomorrow and do it again. And you know what? I don't know that they're gone, that they're missing. If they're non-essential, get rid of them. There's a real strong push up here, up in Montana, that these lands that were stolen from us by the federal government.
Yep.
Because essentially what happened when we became a state, they took all our property from all the land that was state-owned property. They took it. They just seized it and made it federal property. There's a huge push to return that land to the state of Montana. So that would include Yellowstone and Glacier and all those other places. And I'll guarantee that we'll manage it a whole lot better than the feds do. Have you been to Yellowstone Park or Glacier?
Not to Glacier. I've been to Yellowstone many, many years ago.
Now you go there, and it's a UN heritage site, UN World Heritage Site. You go in, the people working at the counter where you have to pay to go in are states handle their own crap. The feds keep the Canadians from invading and keep the Mexicans from flooding over the border and regulate disputes between Montana and North Dakota over the price of wheat or whatever, and stay the heck out of our damn business. Quit taking money from us. That's my opinion on it. I don't even know that they're shut down today. I'm still out working, and I'll guarantee that they're going to not take any less tax money from me at the end of the day. They're still going to take a few $100 at the end of the week. To heck with them. I'm almost to the point, Mike, where I'm to the point where I'm starting to really loathe the federal government.
Yep. Well, you've got a lot of company on that one.
Yeah. Well, I hope that cooler heads will prevail.
Okay. Well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are now open. Okay, turning to immigration, the refugee crisis, catch and release at the border is officially over. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, the policy used to be that they would catch the illegals coming over the border, and then they would be released on the American side of the fence while their request for amnesty or citizenship was being processed, which can take years. Well, Trump has put a stop to that, and Mexico is now keeping all of these asylum seekers on their side of the fence while their asylum paperwork is being processed. And I can imagine that the migrant horde is not happy about that. They were told that they were just going to walk up to the border with the United States and step over and everything was going to be just fine. Wrong again. That's how you stop the immigration refugee problem. You take away the incentive for them to come here. You stop giving them free stuff. You basically throw everybody who gives them a job in prison where they deserve to be under Title VIII, or where they give them housing. If they can't feed themselves, if they can't work, if they're basically being treated like pariahs, they will turn around and go home. Apparently, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez caused a bit of a stir trying to compare the immigrants at the border to baby Jesus. And it was not well received because in the traditional story of Christmas, Joseph and Mary went to Bethlehem to be registered for taxation by the Roman Empire. They didn't illegally cross a border. Nobody stopped them from going to Bethlehem. And so for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that was a bit of a reach out there trying to equate the people trying to sneak into this country with baby Jesus. And a lot of people called her on that. And you know what's really funny? Back in 2006, it was the Democrats who were saying, build that fence. Now, when he was a senator, Obama once offered praise for the border control legislation that would become the basis for one of Donald Trump's first acts as president. Now, in October of 2006, Obama was saying, the bill before us will certainly do some good, saying it would provide better fences and better security along our borders and would help stem some of the tide of illegal immigrants into this country. Now, Obama was talking about the Secure Fence Act of 2006, which was legislation authorizing a barrier along the southern border. It was passed into law with the support of 26 Democratic senators, including Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and Chuck Schumer. Now it's the legal foundation for Trump to order the construction of the wall. And the Democrats are out there just screaming, no, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. And the Democrats are out there screaming that Trump is plunging the country into chaos with this shutdown. Well, no, it's the Democrats who are plunging the nation into chaos because they're refusing to fund the wall, which they themselves voted for back in 2006. And they're trying to make it a personal issue between the Democrats and Trump. They just want to beat him. They don't want him to accomplish anything. They would basically want to destroy his image for 2020. Get him out of there. And their Trump derangement syndrome is so furious, they're willing to allow criminal, illegal immigrants with highly contagious diseases into the country to mingle among us. That's how little they care about the American people and the American culture. This has become a genitalia measuring contest. And Trump is saying, yeah, he's going to stand his ground on that. So Democrats are out there calling Trump the Grinch who stole Christmas. Gee, we wanted to have all these illegals come into the country in time for Christmas. And apparently Senator Tim Kaine compared the president to the Grinch on CNN. Okay. Now, the Democrats sort of kind of got their way because apparently the detention centers in Texas have become overrun. And so Immigrations and Customs Enforcement have dumped hundreds of migrants in Texas City. They just left them off at the El Paso bus station. No food, shelter, or money. Hundreds more to come. And apparently medical checks are being ordered on all detained kids as an 8-year-old boy died in custody. Now, the Democrats are out there saying, oh, look, all these deaths of these children, it's all Trump's fault because of his cruelty. No, ultimately, it is the fault of the parents who dragged their kids up to the border through a desert, risking scorpion bite, rattlesnake bite. Those parents brought those kids up here where they got sick and they died. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the immigration issue. And out in California, there's a sheriff has vented his frustration with California's sanctuary laws after a twice-deported criminal carried out a deadly crime spree, which ended with his suicide at the end of a 100-mile-per-hour police chase. And Gustavo Garcia was 36 years old, died in apparently an intentional wrong-way crash in Porterville after shooting dead a gas station attendant, wounding 2 other people, carjacked farm workers, and robbed a convenience store at gunpoint. And the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement released a statement saying that Garcia's rampage could have been prevented if the federal agency had been made aware of his release from jail on Friday after he was picked up on a minor drug charge. Now, as I've said many, many times before, migration is a filtering process. You're not getting a representative cross sample of people from the source country. The people who are doing well in that country, they're going to stay there. They're not going to give up their lives. So what we're getting are people who didn't do well in their home country. We're getting criminals fleeing prosecution. We're getting people with serious illnesses who believe they're going to be able to get free medical care up here. All right, we got some callers waiting on the line here, and we're going to start with Layla in Ontario. Aloha, Layla. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. It's after Christmas, and I hope that since this is not a religious show, I can offer some facts, and I'll be allowed to finish. There was no census the year that Jesus was born. The reason that Joseph was taking Mary to Egypt was to prevent her from being stoned by the Canaanites, who would regularly stone women who were pregnant out of marriage. Secondly, the story about Jesus having to stay in a manger because there was no room at the inn. In those days, hospitality towards relatives was an absolute requirement. Anyone who turned away a relative was going to be stoned and killed. So the father of Jesus, the person, not the God in heaven, Joseph, if he had any relatives in Bethlehem, he would have absolutely been offered a place to stay. People would have given up their own bed to make room for him. But in any case, in those days, the animals were kept in the lower level. The residents lived upstairs.
Yes.
There was a hole in the floor so that the heat from the animals would rise up. Thus, if Jesus was born and placed in the manger, it was in order to make sure that he was warm and would not die of cold. Secondly, if indeed there had been a census, do you think that Augustus Caesar would be dumb enough to say, I care about your ancestry, go to the place of your ancestors in order to be enumerated?
Layla, I got to put you on hold. Do not hang up. We're going to come right back to this after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and we're talking with Layla in Ontario, who is bringing some clarity to the traditional story of Jesus. And Layla, I am well aware that the Orthodox account of Jesus and Joseph and Mary in Bethlehem was pretty much created by the Council of Nicaea, and they weren't trying to be historically accurate. They were trying to basically spin a story that would, sell the religion. I mean, they didn't even get his name right. Yeshua, translated directly into English, is Joshua, where Jesus came from.
No, it's not. No, it's not, Mike. No, it's not, Mike. His name was fabricated after the Romans used Greek to create the Bible in order to deflect attention from themselves.
Well, that's what I was about to say. That's what I was about to say before you cut me off. The confusion came from translating the original Aramaic into Greek and then the Greek into Roman, and that's how Yeshua became Jesus.
No.
Okay.
Forgive me, Mike. There, I spent decades researching the topic with people who know, as well as with Aramaic priests and Greek priests. The book was written in Greek in order for the Romans to deflect attention from themselves. They created that religion because it taught that you were supposed to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, and your reward would come in heaven. So that way, they could subdue the rebels. But let me get back to the concept. And his name was created afterwards. Once the myth was created, he was given the name Ishal, which means savior. Who knows what his real name was at the time he was born? I don't dispute that there was a historical guy who tried to be the Messiah amongst many messiahs, because his job, if you're going to relate it to the Judeo-Christian tradition, then the Judaic prophecy was for a Messiah, an anointed king who would save them from the occupation of numerous empires, not just the Romans being only the latest. But even if the Romans were doing a census, the purpose was for taxation.
Yes.
So why would a logical man like Augustus say, you have to go off to where your ancestors were purportedly born in order for us to enumerate your assets? They would have enumerated or looked at Joseph's assets where he was living in Nazareth. But Joseph was either a relative, since relatives often married. He may have been betrothed to her. But the Canaanites had a nasty habit, and which the people today still practice, of stoning women who are pregnant out of marriage. So he took her to Egypt, where sexuality was extremely liberal.
Yes.
On his way to Egypt, she may have fallen into labor, and he would have taken her to a house of relatives, where the relatives, if they had sheep and goats, would have kept them in the lower level, which is where the manger would have been, and that would be the warmest place to put any newborn baby. But the concept of Jesus being connected to the Judea, this is one thing that really bothers me. Actually, one of many things. The Judeo-Christian tradition. Judaism was full of warlords. Jews and Christians were constantly killing each other. If you look, have you ever heard of Nestorius? The Nestorian tradition is what gave rise to the council that you talk about, because Nestorius said it was wrong to call Mary the mother of God, that she could, it was an obscenity. To him, you could only call Mary the mother of Jesus. And because Nestorius said that, he was executed eventually by Cyril of Alexandria, and he was considered a heretic. Then they convened the Council of Nicaea, which you talk about, wherein they created this tripartite Christ.
Yes.
I went through life with the sign of the cross. And I remember my uncle saying, don't make the sign of the cross, it's the sign of death. And by the way, crucifixion was extremely common.
Yes.
The Assyrians were very, very talented at torture. Not only did they, they're the ones who invented crucifixion and taught all the torture to the subsequent empires, including the Roman Empire, who was so gifted at torture. But they learned it while they were in the, quote, Holy Land.
Yes.
The whole concept of Jesus as being God incarnate, this is why the Jews hated the people of the time, the Judeans, the people who followed the Hebrew faith, found Jesus such a profound heretic. If he claimed that he was the exclusive and unique Son of God, that made everyone else mere cattle. So they objected. And secondly, it was an absolute obscenity to say that God was going to assume human form, because in the Judaic religion, no idol could even, no icon could even be made. The calf, the golden calf, could not be worshipped. So here comes this group of people who say Jesus is the Son of God and we're supposed to worship him as God himself, incarnate. The whole thing is an absurdity. I say this after Christmas because I hope everyone enjoyed their fantasy. Now, I was born in Bethlehem, baptized in the Church of the Nativity. My parents were married in the Church of the Nativity. I attended Catholic and Orthodox, Christian Orthodox schools, and I was baptized as a Greek. So I am, I am not by nature, by birth, a heretic. What I have done is extensive research, and I am so sick of hearing this story about, oh, Jesus then, was born in Bethlehem because Joseph had to go to Bethlehem. No, he was rescuing Mary from being stoned. And he may well have been the father. He may not have been the father. He may have married her out of honor, just simply because she was part of the family. Family honor was already a huge issue.
Well, hang on a second. There's one of the stories that I uncovered when I was doing my research that said, and it's kind of interesting because Monty Python in their movie The Life of Brian, they actually include this as part of their storyline, was that Mary got raped by a Roman centurion by the name of Pantarius, and that's what they say. Say again?
Yeah, that's what they say. I doubt it. If she was raped, she would have been stoned because nobody would have, even her family would have stoned her. Because even as late as the 60s, if anybody was born by rape, the child was either killed as well as the mother. I'm talking 1960s. If the child was a product of rape, especially by someone who was abhorred, like the Roman soldiers would have been, and they weren't, the baby would have been killed, the mother would have been killed. I know of one person who is second or third cousin to me. They do not know he did not discover that he was not even Armenian. He was given away through the Armenian church to an Armenian family in a nearby country. And he was told he was Armenian until they did his DNA ancestry and discovered that he was actually from the region of Palestine, and he contacted me to see if I knew anything about it. All my relatives said, I don't know anything about it. But there used to be nuns that would go around collecting babies wrapped in newspaper left in alleyways to die.
Yeah. Because
they were born illegitimate. So if that was true, that Mary had been raped by a Roman soldier, she would never have told anybody, because she knows she would have been stoned and then the child would have been killed. That is not likely.
Well, definitely a good reason for Joseph to get her out of Dodge here. Anyway, Layla, thank you for the journey down memory lane. But we do have some more news to do. We do have another caller waiting on the line. And so I'm going to say aloha to you and happy Boxing Day. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to switch over to Mark in Georgia. Aloha, Mark. Thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Well, one, I think a point of clarification, the front site promotion, RPM will not be allowed to promote it on the website, but if you know how to get in touch, I think his name is Dan Schlesinger, he's the guy that's going to be in charge of basically collecting funds and setting up the thing, but he said, you can do this anytime, you just can't do it on RPN, and I guess if anybody calls in and asks, you have to tell them, because personally, my issue is that apparently Big Brother thinks I'm good. So they denied me permission to procure a firearm for some kind of record foul-up, even though I've never been indicted, prosecuted, or convicted or pled guilty of any felony, forcible misdemeanor. I don't know if anybody's got any kind of restraining order on me or any of that nonsense. So I don't know what they have on my record, but it's a mistake. And so that's my issue about the front site thing. Just to be clear, you can't promote it on air, you can't promote it on the website, but it is still an ongoing thing to bring in money for RBN, and I intend to get that. But I do want to get this thing cleared up first.
Yeah, because, I think we do need to get it cleared up, because my understanding is that Monday is the deadline, and after that, it shuts down. By the way, his name is Dan Sutterfield, not Schlesinger.
Oh, Sutterfield, correct. Thank
okay.
You. Yeah, touch base with him, because what he told me is RBN is not allowed to promote it on there or on the website, but it's still an still an ongoing thing. You just have to know who to get in contact to do it. But I would like to offer a suggestion that I've gave thought to is they call them uninvited guests. I call them uninvited guests. But if we had a thing called provisional documentation, and should be run on a state level, because I look at how the federal government has screwed up everything. But I think that we should have a way that if somebody doesn't have any kind of green card or any other kind of papers, it's like, here's the deal. We're going to take your photograph with stereoscopic 3D so we can identify you, any distinguishing marks or tattoos, especially gang-related tattoos. Take your digital fingerprint, and maybe even give them a voucher for it's like within 30 days you need to go to see a doctor to make sure you don't have communicable diseases. But the point about the provisional identification is to at least get a handle on the people that are here that did not follow the proper protocols, or quite commonly they overstay their visas, right?
Yes.
So I don't think that's an alternative. Ask this lady, God bless her, but I don't know where she got her information. The first Council of Nicaea was about the issue of the doctrine of the Trinity versus what was called the Arian heresy, which, that was the majority view before the first Council of Nicaea. They debated it, came out with the doctrine of the Trinity, and I don't really want to go hashing out about doctrinal issues, but I don't know where she's getting her information. But here's one thing, one minor thing. I looked in the Septuagint and the book of Joshua. That's where they translate between the Old Testament and the New Testament. They took the Old Testament and translated it into Greek because it was a common language. And there were people growing up Jewish that didn't speak Hebrew, so they translated the Old Hebrew into Greek. That's LXX is the designation for the Septuagint. And in the Septuagint, the book of Joshua is spelled the same way that Jesus is spelled in the New Testament. And I looked that up for somebody who had some misconceptions about, it's a consonantal iota, which became the letter J. But that confuses some people, and I'm like, look, free to believe whatever you want, but don't believe things in reaction to some bad idea that you go overboard about. Because, Mary and Joseph went to Egypt because basically they were warned to flee because Herod issued a decree that all children under 2 years old be killed, and they were warned. Now, if she doesn't accept that, that's the canonical account. Fine, believe whatever you want, but I'm not going to be dogmatic about that because I don't see any benefit to being to majoring in the minors. To me, dogma means a human consensus that's been given a bit more authority than it really ought to have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but you need to understand, first of all, the Council of Nicaea was an effort to reconcile all the various different Christian sects of the time who all had very different ideas about what was going on. They were all using different texts and documents, and so Nicaea basically created the canonical Bible as we know it. Every book that was in it was written decades after the death of the historical character of Jesus, Joshua, whatever. And decades without CNN, decades without libraries. But the Council of Nicaea is where Jesus was declared to be divine, and Layla is correct in saying this did anger the Jews who were still waiting for the Messiah to come and save them. Jesus was a revolutionary. Jesus was a revolutionary. He did try and challenge for the throne of Judea. That's why they put that sign on his cross, the King of the Jews. Anyway, listen, Mark, we're going to let you go.
Well, some other time. All right.
Happy
New Year, and I hope you have a merry humbug.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you here and go here. And no, we're not a religious show, and I'd rather not get into it. I have been informed by our control room technician that the front sight deal will be available indefinitely after the new year. So Mark in Georgia was correct about that aspect of it. and I don't know if we're forbidden from advertising it, but we'll sort that out as we get into the new year here. Okay. Finishing up on the economic news, car production had a very, very bad November. In fact, it was the worst November since the financial crisis back in 2008. This is all taking place amid the Brexit mess. This is British car production. A lot of car companies, they're overproducing vehicles. They can't get rid of them. They're holding lots all over the place here. Now, here is a good example of where political correctness and the open borders agenda went horribly wrong. Now, there are these two women, Louisa Jespersen and Maren Uland, and apparently when they went to university, were saturated with moral relativism, contemptuous of absolutes. Apparently, there's no dispute between people that can't be settled by mutually respectful dialogue, and that all the troubles in the world today are primarily the fault of the U.S. and Israel. So these two girls from Scandinavia just decided to go to Morocco, secure in the belief that Islam is a religion of peace, and only racist, bigoted Islamophobes think otherwise. And apparently they ran into some Islamists who gang raped them and then beheaded them and sent the video footage to their mother. Now, not all Muslims behave this way, but enough of them do where you have to be very, very careful. Back in Sweden, their national TV is under fire. SVT has come under a storm of criticism for the way they covered this double murder of these two women in Morocco. And a lot of viewers complained that the state broadcaster seemed more concerned by the video of the killing being spread, because it's all over the internet now, and it is very grisly, than the murders themselves. And they're saying the media in Sweden is hushing it up. They didn't even say the girls were beheaded. They simply said they had throat wounds. So they're still pushing that whole globalist blend everybody together. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently they've got protests going on down in Tunisia. The whole world seems to be rising up here. That ties in with this next article. This is from Sputnik News, talking about how there is a growing pushback against open borders and globalism. And the European migration crisis has reshaped the way governments handle border control. And those who are opposed to mass migration are starting to win elections. So Angela Merkel is still pushing her open door policy, but then you have Viktor Orban's Europe is under invasion perspective. So it's starting to get contentious here. Speaking of Viktor Orban, he came on out with a very common sense statement. Europe will be stable and successful only if it remains European. That's definitely a very, very good idea. And again, lest I start getting all the hate mail, I'm not against immigration. I'm against illegal immigration that is running without any controls or restraint. There is a legal immigration process to go through. And for those who've gone through it, welcome. I hope we're not proving to be too much of a disappointment. Okay, last week, end of last week, there was a big dust up over at Gatwick Airport where there were reports that drones were flying over the runway. And it led to a shutdown of the airport with 140,000 passengers being affected. Many had to cancel their holiday plans. Everybody was looking for the perpetrators. 2 people were arrested but then released and exonerated. Now, police said they had 67 reports of drone sighting, which they called credible, but apparently nobody got one of them on video. And police are starting to say there's a possibility there never was a drone at Gatwick. Somebody just said, I think I see a drone. Everybody else said, oh yes, I see it too. And it just went completely out of control. Okay, apparently there was a major problem with families who bought turkeys for their Christmas dinner. And apparently disgusted families are posting photos of rancid turkeys on social media as they blame the supermarkets for ruining Christmas by supplying inedible meat. And apparently the turkeys were purchased from Waitrose, Tesco, Morrison's, Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer, Asda, Aldi, and Lidl. And they were actually rotten to the point of being inedible. So, supply chain issue or just a greedy retailer here. Okay, up in British Columbia, there is this imam, Yunus Kathrada, who basically came on out during his sermon for the Muslim youth of Victoria, saying that to say Merry Christmas is worse than murder. And he's talking about Muslims saying it to their Christian friends. So Twitter is going to work on him as well. Okay, here's an interesting story. And again, it's political correctness run amok. Over at a London shopping center, they installed or painted a series of parking spaces aimed at promoting diversity. 24 new white painted signs were created to celebrate modern families, including same-sex couples and single parents at Westfield in Shepherd's Bush. Now, some of the icons were easy to decipher. Others had customers scratching their heads wondering if it was okay to park there. Now, the signs for same-sex couples were relatively obvious, but more obscure ones such as grandparent, guardian, and child, and pregnant mother with female partner and baby proved more difficult. And the parking spaces were an attempt to challenge the traditional mother, father, and child signs seen across the country. Not working out very good. Okay, Japan has decided they're going to pull out from the International Whaling Commission starting next year in order to resume commercial whaling in July after a 30-year pause. Well, it wasn't that much of a pause, because there was a provision in the 1946 Convention for the Regulation of Whaling that allowed whales to be killed for scientific purposes. So Japan was sending whaling ships down to Antarctica, and every time they would kill a whale, they would hold up a sign saying, we're doing scientific research for the benefit of Greenpeace and the Sea Shepherd, who were down there trying to stop it. But now Japan has just said, we're getting on out of it, and we're going to go back to commercial whaling. Just deal with it. Again, from the world of political correctness. Last week, everybody was talking about all these things that got banned. Oh, you can't have Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It shows bullying and insensitivity. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we were talking about how in the run-up to Christmas, the PC social justice warrior types were out there basically attacking Christmas icons. The animated Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was deemed inappropriate. It showed bullying and insensitivity. Frosty the Snowman and White Christmas were declared racist, and things like that. And one of the traditional Hollywood songs, holiday songs rather, Baby It's Cold Outside. Now this is almost 7 years old. It won an Academy Award, and it's just a couple who are obviously ending their date, and the guy wants the woman to stay, and he's saying, baby, it's cold outside, and she's singing it to him as well. So they went on the attack saying, this is promoting date rape. This promotes date rape. This song has got to go here. Well, over at WAKY-FM, Chris Randolph basically played different versions of the song constantly for several hours last Sunday. Try and say, yeah, we're going to stand under our First Amendment rights. Okay, over in Colorado, baker Jack Phillips, you may remember him. He got global attention for refusing to bake a cake for a gay couple's wedding, went to court over it, and the judge basically ruled that, yeah, it was a little bit of silliness here. Well, apparently he's back in court over allegations that he discriminated against transgender lawyer Autumn Scardina when he denied her request for a transition day cake. Now, I have to ask if Autumn Scardina deliberately sought out Jack Phillips to target him for another lawsuit or to get her name in the papers. I mean, given the press Jack received over the previous incident, she had to know who he was. Now, as you know, Daniel Craig is currently making what will be his last James Bond movie. And all over the Twitterverse, there are already calls that the next James Bond should be transgender. And it's met with a great deal of sarcasm. You know, that they want a transgender woman to play James Bond. And Twitter people are saying, what about a female Thor, a vegan Batman, or maybe 007 can be a cat? And what about a bisexual Godzilla? Now, apparently the director, Dominic West, is saying that, yes, Bond could be portrayed by a transgender woman. And he's already found one, Hannah Graff, who is the highest-ranking transgender soldier of the British Army. Well, I'm going to make a forecast right now that this is going to be a disaster. We know that when comic book publishers went PC and sort of toned down the sexuality of their female heroes, sales dropped. The ratings for the new female Doctor Who have not been that great. They had a high opening, but week after week the numbers kept dropping and dropping and dropping. Don't mess with the formula. Apparently over on Facebook, they're facing a lot more criticism. More of their misdeeds are being revealed. And there's apparently a great deal of pressure to oust the company's current leadership team of Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg. Facebook itself is looking at possible serious legal situations. And this all began back with the New York Times revealing that Facebook had shared user data with Cambridge Analytica. And it seems like ever since then, every month goes by, there's the revelation of some new scandal. And there have been stories about Facebook letting its users' private data be breached, but nothing on the scale of a New York Times investigation that was published last Tuesday, where the New York Times admitted it was one of the companies that had Facebook-approved access to private user data from Facebook. And apparently the bombshell from the New York Times was that information from Facebook was mainly shared with major tech companies like Microsoft, Amazon, and Spotify. And the New York Times was one of 9 media organizations that also obtained special access to things like a user's friends list. Now, disclosing this information violated Facebook's normal privacy rules. Was meant to help companies better target consumers while raising internal advertising revenues. But for companies like the Times and Netflix, access to the data of 2.2 billion people would effectively be a gold mine here. But a lot of people are saying this may be the last straw. Facebook may be doomed. for allowing user data to be compromised. Facebook just gave it away. This is not a hack. This is not a leak. Facebook just went to these companies and said, look, we're going to let you pour through our user data. And the outrage is growing. And again, there are demands for Mark Zuckerberg to resign. I think what we need in this country, we need a consumer privacy protection law with teeth in it, meaning that when some organization like a Facebook or a Twitter or a Google loses track of our private information, that they can be sued. We don't have one right now. That's why they're abusing us this way. It's not illegal for them to do what they're doing. Apparently, Washington, D.C.'s Attorney General has now filed a lawsuit against Facebook for allowing Cambridge Analytica to improperly access data from as many as 87 million users before the 2016 presidential elections. So, now do you remember that story we talked about last week where apparently there was a Democratic operative who set up all these phony Russian sites and Facebook pages and tried to basically swing the election down in Alabama away from Roy Moore by making it look like Moore was being supported by the Russians. So Moore unfortunately did lose that election. And apparently the Democratic operative who came up with that Russian false flag scheme against Roy Moore promoted his own propaganda on the dubious Hamilton 68 website, which purports to track Russian bot activity, yet refuses to say how they do it. And apparently Jonathan Morgan, who was paid $100,000 by liberal billionaire Reid Hoffman to orchestrate this Russian false flag, was exposed last week by the New York Times. All right, we're going to take a phone call here from Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You were just talking about Facebook. Wouldn't like the Better Business Bureau apply to something like that at all?
Well, I'm wondering what the basis of a complaint to the Better Business Bureau would be. It would have to be something along the lines of overcharging or preferential charging, or you're not getting the service that you were promised. But I mean, most people, you don't pay for Facebook, so there's no real commerce there.
No.
You know, I think we need to stand up and demand a consumer privacy protection law that will allow us to sue anybody who mishandles our private user data.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're right. But I mean, you know, at this point, I mean, it's this sort of thing has been going on for a long time now. You would think that people, you know, would be either getting tired of it or just fed up with this nonsense and just, you know, you can't really delete your account, but just basically delete your account and, you know, never go on it again. I mean, I did that about 7 years ago or something. I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago when, you know, I got tired of it. I mean, even, you know, I'm watching you on YouTube, and this is how bad it is. I'm looking at the right-hand side of the screen. You can see the other videos that are lined up, and there's a couple of videos in there of the same people that I watched on YouTube, you know, a few days ago. So they're tracking. They're not supposed to. I'm using Firefox with Do Not Track, but they're tracking anyway. It happens on eBay. You know, I mean, this is just continuous. It's going on and on and on. So obviously, like you suggested a while ago, you switch to DuckDuckGo and other platforms. I mean, I do use DuckDuckGo and StartPage, but obviously there's nothing else we can do other than just disengaging from this nonsense.
Well, I disengaged earlier this year. I don't use Facebook anymore. I don't use Twitter. I flip back and forth between Google and DuckDuckGo depending upon the capabilities I need. Startpage, I think, uses the Google engine, so I'm not sure about what's going on there. But you're right. These so-called privacy buttons don't really seem to work, and either it's a case of the browser manufacturers doing a nudge and a wink with all of these data collection companies, or the data collection companies simply figure out workarounds to get around the privacy blocks.
Or they just don't care. They just ignore it.
Yep.
Because, I mean, after all, it is just, do not track. I mean, what does that really mean? It's a suggestion, I suppose, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's like putting your car for sale. Most people will get a hold of you and lowball you as if, the price was a suggestion or whatnot. It's the same sort of thing, I suppose. In the end, I think that, in a couple of years, Facebook will probably end up being irrelevant. There's going to be a class action lawsuit. I mean, just like what's going on in Bear. I was reading, that article on your website about them. I'm sure you touched on that earlier. I mean, we're just getting to the point where we're getting fed up, and these people have got to realize that they're not really in charge. We are. The consumer,
well, we have
the voter,
to act like it. Yeah, we have to act like it. And maybe it's time for us to all start buying yellow vests. Apparently, it's up in Canada now.
Yes, it's a good idea, Mike.
Yep.
That's a very good idea. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go and clear the phone lines. Okay. Russia is very concerned about going through the global internet because of all the spying that is going on and the hacking. And so Russia is getting ready to invest billions building a domestic Russia-only internet. Now, it'll still connect to the outer world, but for traffic that's operating inside Russia, it will be on the Russian net, where hopefully they can better protect the Russian people from hacking and cybercrime. So I think it's a really, really good idea. And I was really surprised to find out there actually is no law regarding cybercrime or hacking or writing bad code that messes with your system. There ought to be. I don't know why there isn't. Over at Caribou Coffee, it's a chain, and apparently they've had a card breach impacting 239 stores through unauthorized access of its point-of-sale systems. So they've got 603 locations, 239 were compromised. It's about 40% of all of its sites. So if you do business with Caribou Coffee, and if you used a credit or debit card at one of the affected stores between August 28th, 2018 and December 3rd, 2018, consider your card details compromised and take precautions such as getting your card replaced, reviewing credit card reports, and enrolling in identity protection problems. Now, users can consult the list of impacted stores via Caribou Coffee's data breach notice posted on its homepage. Okay, over in the Congress, the ex-Senator Hassan, IT aide, who allegedly doxed senators, meaning outing their names and addresses back when all that harassment was going on, back during the Supreme Court confirmation hearings. Apparently, it's now been determined that he downloaded a lot more information than was originally understood. And prosecutors said they found terabytes of data they're reviewing for the case, but apparently they're saying that what they're finding is so sensitive, the public would never hear it discussed. So, okay, Rand Hindi, he's a doctor, and he's basically out there talking about artificial intelligence, and we've been talking about general artificial intelligence, and he said, the idea that we're going to get a human-like artificial intelligence, like Data on Star Trek Next Generation, is ridiculous. Okay? The machines will be powerful, they will be intelligent, but most decisions human makes are actually emotionally driven, and machines don't have that. They're not going to act like humans because they are not human. And it makes perfect sense. It absolutely makes perfect sense. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently, free abortion drugs are being offered on California college campuses. An OBGYN says basically it amounts to medical malpractice. I assume it's the morning after pill here. Meanwhile, good news in Ohio, they have now banned what's called a dismemberment abortion. This is a second trimester procedure where they literally go into the womb and cut the baby into pieces and then extract the pieces. And of course, the abortion supporters are saying, oh, just a blob of protoplasm, doesn't feel any pain. Yeah, and if you believe that one, I got some of Saddam's weapons of mass destruction to sell you. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. Now, over in the Congo, the World Wildlife Fund, you've probably seen their commercials all over the place, one of the world's biggest conservation organizations. And they've been in some trouble, some scandals before, and it looks like they've done it again. Apparently, they're backing a new conservation zone in the Congo Basin called the Mesok-Ja Park. And apparently, they just created it without the free, prior, and informed consent of the people who live on that land, the Baka and Bakwale tribes. Now, according to national and international law, indigenous people must give consent for any project affecting their lands, territories, and resources. And without the consent of the people, the World Wildlife Fund's establishment of Mesok-Ja Park is completely illegal. And so the question is, why are they doing this? It feels like it's more of a land grab. And if they're willing to break the law, you know, what exactly is their motive here? Well, apparently, the land underneath the park means nothing until people decide that they want to develop what lies beneath, and there is the problem, because apparently there are mineral wealth in the ground there. Gold, diamonds, cobalt, copper, and oil are the major resources that are underlying the region. Now, the mining that is there is very small scale, artisanal, and unregulated. And recently, mining groups have targeted coltan and cassiterite, rare minerals used in electronics such as mobile phones. So it looks to me like World Wildlife is basically going for a land grab to make the land available for industrial development. And that's a tacky no-no. But what they're doing is illegal, and I hope the Congo government does stop them here. Residents of Boulder, Colorado have until tomorrow to certify their assault weapons or remove the firearms from city limits. Those who fail to comply could face fines, jail time, confiscation, destruction of the firearms. Now, the Boulder police say they have certified 85 firearms since the city council passed an assault weapon ban all the way last May. Residents who already owned the prohibited rifles, pistols, and shotguns were given the chance to keep their firearms by certifying the prior ownership with police. The council also voted unanimously to ban high-capacity magazines and bump stocks. Now, apparently over in New Jersey, they've got a new gun law, and apparently everybody is ignoring that. Meanwhile, the New York Times is pressuring credit card giants to monitor customers' buying habits and blacklist all gun purchases. And the Time is out there saying that these banks are financing mass shootings by allowing individuals to use their cards to buy firearms and related accessories. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Take what you learn here. Take what you learn to the websites. Share them with everybody that you know. Use email, mailing lists, face-to-face. Bring back the art of the dialogue. Social media is now totally compromised and totally filtered. So we'll be back tomorrow, and aloha America.